So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. You're listening to our latest episode for the week of October 14th, 2024. We're just weeks away from the election. I'm joined today by my politics team colleagues at the General Assembly, Kyle Ingram and Avi Bajpai. Before we get into talking about everything about the legislature and more, we are going to have another live recording of Under the Dome. If you remember our Under the Dome live podcast we did earlier this year with Senator Sawyer and Senator Murdoch, this time we're taking it out of Raleigh. We'll be on the campus of North Carolina Central University in Durham in the School of Education building, and it'll be at 11:30 a.m. on Monday, October 21st. So it is open to everybody. We'll be publishing an evite if you want to register. We really hope to see you there. And you'll get to listen to it too, but you'll get to listen to it first if you actually come. So come on out again. That's Monday, October 21st at Central. So let's get to really like the news the past weeks. We've been talking about Hurricane Helene, and the legislature came back for a day that was already scheduled, but actually did something. It wasn't the gavel in and out where usually the way these goes. Senate Leader Phil Berger and House Speaker Tim Moore, if they come, will talk to reporters and kind of update us on things. This was a lot of action. And if you've read our stories, newsobserver.com, and seen other coverage about what's in the bill, we'll tell you a little bit about the contents, but also tell you what you don't always get from all those stories, or we try to, but it won't always convey. Is really what it was like there on Wednesday. We're talking about 170 lawmakers from across the state, but the focus wasn't as much on all of them, other than the fact that they passed the disaster relief bill unanimously, but on those lawmakers whose districts are devastated, severely impacted by the storm. And some lawmakers that if you're listening to this and you're Raleigh focused, you don't hear their names very much. If you're from their district, of course, you know who they are. I'm talking about people like Representative Dudley Green. Basically what happened is, to start off to introduce the bill, all of the Republicans, they didn't have Democrats with them. It was just the Republicans, but they all showed up. But the ones who talked were the ones from these districts about basically what their personal experiences were like out there in the mountains. And then, an hour or two later, the session started. There was an hours-long delay, if you're wondering about that, when it actually came up for debate and votes. It was typos and there was a wait on bill drafting. So that's why anyone who didn't eat lunch early didn't get lunch that day. So I guess I'll start talking about really that moment where the lawmakers were talking to us beyond just, Berger and Moore saying what's in it, what's going on. And Kyle and I were both there for that, but really just the sharing those initial speeches from the lawmakers themselves. I mentioned Dudley Green. Kyle, I don't know who stood out to you or what they said stood out to you.
Yes, we also heard from Representative Balcom and then also Senator Ralph Heiss. These, like you said, Senator Heiss is well known. He's on the Elections Committee. But you saw these lawmakers getting very personal, which doesn't happen that often, and emotional in some circumstances, talking about seeing this destruction firsthand, entire towns washed away, but also talking about the moments of hope and seeing their communities come together. And, we'll talk about this more as the episode goes on, but you didn't hear a lot of criticism yet of how the response to the emergency was carried out by federal and state government. But what you did hear was a lot of praise for just regular people doing what they can to help their neighbors. And what we heard over and over again from lawmakers at the press conference and throughout the bill passing was this is the first round, and this is going to be months, if not years, of recovery.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Representative Balcom who said I wasn't going to cry, and then, choked up, and other senators, other lawmakers choked up as they were talking on the floor too, because you're talking about just this devastation. Of course, people were killed, but just the idea of not being able to get out. And what really struck me the most, from my perspective, what I had seen, and I was with the votes, I was in the Senate, not in the House, but was Senator Moffitt, and he talked during that presser. And again, we actually our video producer Kevin Keister, who's also a producer on the podcast sometimes too, he put the entire press conference video in the main story that we wrote. So if you all go back to that, it's the headline that talks about Cooper signs this into law. Here's how the money's spent. And we have kind of the clip of the highlights of that video, but we also have everything that they said. So you can hear from everybody. And Moffitt talked about how, people out in the mountains think about the legislature in Raleigh doing things that don't always get out to the mountains. And I remember when I worked in, mountain area of Virginia and hearing people in the local areas complain about Northern Virginia or Richmond, where the capital was, and that focus. And it's interesting that that's kind of a universal thing where people who are further out in states, a lot of times will think all their resources go to the larger areas, or they're somehow separate. But some of the other debate in the Senate was about how those lawmakers in the mountain regions suddenly realized what all the lawmakers on the coast deal with pretty regularly when it comes to disaster and relief needs. And there's this start of a fund for the East that was part of that bill. And then also what Moffitt said about what happens when after the initial devastation, when you're just alone and you're isolated. And yes, mountain people are very resourceful. They've all, said about themselves. But before anybody comes, before the government comes, your neighbors come. And the people, he called them mountain rednecks like me, is how he described himself. And that's who came to your aid. So there's a lot of thanks to that, and thanks to nonprofits, thanks to the faith community. I feel like thanks to the government, but not because they are the government. And I feel like some of them acknowledged that not everyone was happy with the immediate response from state or the federal government. But I didn't really hear any criticism, and not directly from the senators and representatives who were from there. And Avi, you were in the House for that debate. What was really the vibe over there when they were talking about the bill?
It was a lot of the same, a lot of recognition of how people came together in the immediate aftermath to look out for each other. I heard multiple representatives talk about, like you were saying before, the first responders were able to get through the debris and get to people before the local officials, before FEMA was able to get there. Neighbors were looking out for each other, going door to door. And trying to check in on each other. And there was, people brought up, faith-based groups, volunteers, churches, everyone. I think it was Representative Lindsay Prather who was saying, she was grateful for local radio, not only for bringing people, because that was one of the only ways people could access information. So not only bringing people important news and updates, but also in the days afterwards, some musical levity, bringing a smile to people's faces. So there was a lot of that. Representative Caleb Rudow, also him and Representative Prather, both from Buncombe County, he made an interesting point. He was talking about the response and the situation on the ground, and he was expressing, how grateful he was for the different response at different levels of government. But he was trying to stress the point of how devastating the flooding was. He mentioned, in some areas, the floodwaters reached a height of 25 feet. And he was talking to all of his colleagues, all the lawmakers on the House floor, and he was saying, why don't you, look up at the blinds above in the House chamber on the gallery, so kind of like sort of the second floor, like above the House floor where everyone sits. There are these giant blinds that are on the windows above the gallery, and he was saying, you look up at the top of that, that's 25 feet, and imagine water rushing through at that height and just destroying everything in its path.
And Avi and I also have another story we did where we took there's the Rudall anecdote, some of the anecdotes of what the lawmakers were saying, and then some of the needs too. Part of that includes what Representative Green was saying about how with the recovery, the past week or so, the weather so far has been pretty good, but it's getting colder. So it's not just housing for people, it's heating. And there's just more and more things as, we're at mid-October now. And obviously the weather's, colder in the mountains than here and what's to come. I want to play this clip from Senate Leader Phil Berger. This was him talking to reporters in the gaggle after the Senate session. So all of the senators that spoke were all the ones that were impacted or peripherally. And at the very end, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who decided to preside, he usually doesn't come to the Senate, talked kind of like sort of complaining about political posturing and everything, and talked about his perspective. So anyway, we were asking what Berger thought about that, about any sort of criticism of response from the government or anybody else. And here's what Berger said.
I think the instances of things being done right, things being done quickly, things being done helpful to people far outweigh any instances where there's a problem. Where there's a problem, we need to fix it. But the outpouring of support and assistance that has come from churches, from Samaritan's Purse, from volunteer organizations has really impacted people's lives. I think probably at this point more than government has impacted their lives.
So Berger is the way he's talking there, and I think what we'll see when they come back on October 24th will be some of the same. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what's next, and then election and politics, and then our picks for headliner of the week. We'll be right back.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Avi Bajpai and Kyle Ingram. Before the break, we were talking a lot about how things were getting done and how everyone was talking about this first round of Hurricane Helene relief, which I hadn't noted yet. It's $273 million that's in the bill, which Cooper already signed into law on Thursday, just the day after they passed it. And it uses money from the Savings Reserve, which is also known as the Rainy Day Fund. And I've got another story that'll be published by the time you're listening to this about what we'll be looking at for that session coming up in 2 weeks and what they want to do and really the known and unknowns at this point. But one thing we do know that was in that bill, Kyle, if you can give sort of a quick primer for people that maybe didn't know the exact parts of how Election Day is impacted now.
Yeah, so they included basically a codification of changes that the State Board of Elections had already made to make it easier for people in Western North Carolina to vote, given the fact that the Postal Service is disrupted and some polling sites have been destroyed. Basically what it does is make it easier for county boards of elections to change or remove polling sites during early voting or Election Day voting to accommodate for that. It also makes it a little bit easier for voters in those counties to get absentee ballots and get those absentee ballots in by the Election Day deadline. As we talked about earlier, everyone was generally on the same page at the legislature and, getting along about getting this relief passed. It passed unanimously, but there was one minor point of contention on the House floor when Representative Caleb Rudow, as we mentioned earlier, who's a Democrat from Buncombe, he tried to get this bill to come forward on the House floor. that would have extended the voter registration deadline by 1 week and also given voters in Western counties an extra 3 days to get their absentee ballot in after Election Day. These have been points of contention already in previous legislative sessions, and it was struck down pretty quickly. Representative Destin Hall, Republican, who's set to become the next Speaker of the House, sort of said, I was never contacted about this before, and alluded to it as sort of partisan games.
A vibe check, if you will.
Yeah.
You checked him. All right. Well, speaking of election and laws, Avi, switching off from the Helene stuff, what's going on Bishop and Jackson in the AG race?
Yeah, it's been, by all accounts, a close race as was expected. And, the Bishop campaign has filed a lawsuit against the Jackson campaign, against the Democratic Party here and the Democratic Attorneys General Association. They say that there was some polling being done earlier this year, back in July, and a sort of unflattering story that was published in the New Republic magazine about Bishop's legal career before he became a congressman. They were saying basically in this lawsuit that this polling was kind of pushing this notion that Bishop had represented people, when he was a lawyer, clients who stole money from the elderly. And that was one of the questions asked of voters. Would you be more or less likely to vote for Bishop if you knew this? And they were really taking exception to this being presented as fact of sorts. So that lawsuit was filed earlier this month and just came to light this past week. It was interesting. We reached out to both campaigns. The Bishop campaign said that they weren't going to sit back and let something that was false be promoted through polling and be promoted in the campaign. And they also noted that the last couple of there's a bit of there have been instances of claims being challenged as defamatory in attorney general races. Mm-hmm. This happened in 2020 during the really bitterly fought race between Josh Stein and Jim O'Neill.
Oh yeah, O'Neill's still mad about it.
Yeah, and then they actually referred back to a lawsuit that was filed in 2000 during Governor Cooper's first run for AG. And that was a case that was settled 14 years later. So they're trying to make this point that there's sort of a pattern here. We'll see what voters make of that. But the Jackson campaign responded. They said they look forward to the lawsuit's swift resolution, and they said that Bishop says he wants to be Mark Robinson's sidekick. That's a sort of point that they've been hammering home recently, and they say, we imagine this will have as much success as Mark Robinson's legal actions.
Right. So that's a reference to the Mark Robinson, resulting scandal after that CNN K-File report, where Robinson denies everything, the reports of people offering to help him file a lawsuit. Immediately there, as we record this Thursday afternoon, a lawsuit has not been filed, but Robinson has retained legal counsel, which is, I believe, actually the phrase that Speaker Moore used when myself and other reporters were asking Moore and Berger if they still endorsed Robinson or not. And Moore said he's not going to change his endorsement, that he talked to Robinson and believes him, believes his denial, but also mentioned that, he has his own congressional race to worry about. Berger didn't want to talk about it at all. He said, ask another time. And I said, well, when? And he said, just ask another time. So we'll let you know how that pans out. We're going to move on to our picks for headliner of the week. Avi and Kyle, y'all have similar headliners in your usual theme that's not politics at all. Kyle, you want to go first?
Yeah, I feel like it's always movie corner when it comes to me and Avi. But mine for this week is going to be that I went to go see Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's science fiction epic that just came out a few weeks ago. And I thought it was just absolutely terrible. And it's like 2.5 hours long. And I seriously considered walking out, which I've never done in a movie before. I know Avi is a big Francis Ford Coppola fan, so I'm not sure his thoughts on it.
I mean, I'm a fan in the sense that he's directed some of the greatest movies of all time. But yeah, I saw Megalopolis too. I'm not going to say it was, I imagine you'd give it 0 stars or 1 star.
I gave it 1.
I gave it 3. I don't think it was that bad, but it was curious. But for my headliner, I'm gonna go. That's the most flattering thing I can say about it. I respect that. It's his passion project. He's putting it out after working on it for 40 years. I'm gonna go see it, but it's not for everyone.
It just had the vibe of like he would not let anyone be on that production who was going to tell him no about anything.
He needed an editor.
It seemed like it
everyone
had
needs
been
an editor.
Rewritten and reworked like several times.
Curious.
Yeah. I'm going to go with, I saw The Shining recently. I'd seen it before several years ago, but I'd sort of forgotten some of it. Maybe not forgotten some of it, but like just you have to rewatch it to like fully experience and appreciate it. It's a fantastic movie.
One of my favorites.
I'm just gonna give a shout out to the late Stanley Kubrick for making The Shining. Great movie.
I haven't seen any movies lately, but I have been rewatching West Wing. So any other NC Pole folks out there that want to talk about it, it's not as good as I remember. But anyway, I like a lot more opinions on what the reality is of politics, right? And my headliner is, it's multiple headliners about our press corps colleagues, but the news part primarily is the Insider event. You all, I'm sure, know that Insider used to be our colleagues here at McClatchy. They're owned by State Affairs now, and Clifton Dow and Matthew Sasser are the Insider reporters, editors, and they had an event with Senate Majority Leader Newton and Representative Ball, one from each party at Cafe Luna. And it was really interesting talking a lot about Helene relief and other things, but it was a chance for kind of NC Pole world to get together and hear that and then discuss the news of the day. So shout out to them. And then also CBS 17, Michael Hyland is leaving the press corps. As you all are listening to this, he is no longer part of NC Pole, but he is still in the political world. He took a job down in Savannah in management at the station down there. So we're going to miss Michael Hyland, Michael Barnard, who's the photographer you always see with the other Michael. You'll see them shoot their stand-ups around the Capitol grounds around 6 if you're driving by, and of course many times at the Legislative Building. So Michael Hyland's been a good colleague, so we'll miss him. And then I don't think I've mentioned on a podcast yet, Mary Helen Jones from Spectrum left and went. She left the political and journalism world last month. So it's a loss with both of them. They're both great colleagues, really, and enjoyed working with them. So that's it for us this week. I'm Dawn Vaughan here with Avi Bajpai, Kyle Ingram, producer Laura Brache. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.